Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nedarim Daf Samach. This is the daf for Shabbat. We're going to start at the bottom of Nun Tet Amud Bet. We're finally going to finish the sugya and finish the chapter about the gidulim, things that grow, and can they nullify the original. So Gufa, we're going to go back 3 lines from the bottom of Nun Tet Amud Bet. Amar Rabbi Chanina Tirta'a Amar Rabbi Yanai Batzal Shel Truma Shenita'o V'Rabu Gidulim Alikoro Mutal. This is something we saw back on 57b, that if you have, Rabbi Yanai says, if you have an onion of truma, right now we're assuming the onion is actual truma. Hold off that we're going to change this a little bit. That one planted, and now all of a sudden what grew was more than, right, and can nullify the original. It works. So the Gemara says, Lamem, are you trying to say, which we've been saying, right? We've been trying to say all along, the permissible ones override the forbidden ones. How could that be? Hadran, doesn't it say in the Mishna? Gidulei truma. Truma, this is a different Mishnah. There's a Mishnah in Trumot, which says the gidulim of truma are truma. Okay? Meaning the things that grow out of truma have the status of truma. That seems to go directly against what Rabbi Yanai said. To which the Gemara says, Bigidulei gidulim ka'amrinan. The Mishnah said if you plant truma, whatever grows is going to be truma also. Not nullified, okay, or meaning the truma isn't nullified in, right? They have the status of truma as well. But Rabbi Yanai was saying, if you then plant, in other words, it's already once removed. So if you plant what was grown from truma, even though not all of it's truma, and you plant that, what grows from there will not be truma. And that's what Rabbi Yanai meant. So now we're going to change Rabbi Yanai. When he said an onion of truma, he meant an onion that had grown from the original onion was truma, something grew from there, and then that growth we replanted. To which the Gemara says, what do you mean then? Hanami Tanina, that also, forget about, first we said the Mishnah contradicts, now we're going to say that appears explicitly in that Mishnah. As if you're trying to say the gidulim of the gidulim, what grows from a growth is going to be not truma. Well, the Mishnah itself says that, gidulim, chulin. Whatever grows from the growth is actually chulin. So that doesn't make any sense. In other words, Rabbi Yanai can't contradict an explicit Mishnah. To which the Gemara says, we're going to say the following. The Mishnah was talking about if you plant things like legumes, which disappear when, right, they disintegrate in the ground when a new one grows. Then the gidulim are forbidden. Comes Rabbi Yanai to say, well, not only that case, but even if it's onions or garlics, which grow within, right? They grow, actually come out, like we've been talking about. The new growth includes the original. It doesn't disintegrate. Even then, the gidulim of the gidulim, again, you take an onion that was grown from a truma original, you take the growth, you replant it, it's going to be permitted. So he was adding to the Mishnah. To which the Gemara says, 1 minute. V'hatnan, but there's a Mishnah that contradicts that. In other words, you want to say that Rabbi Yanai is talking about things like onions and garlics, which the seed doesn't, what you planted doesn't disintegrate. But it says in the Mishnah, hatevel gidulav mutarim b'davar shezaro kaleh. If you plant tevel, which is something that you haven't taken truma maschot from, the gidulim will be permitted as long as the seed disintegrates. Aval davar she'en zaro kaleh gidulei gidulim asurin. But if it doesn't disintegrate, then again, the tevel is you planted something that grew from tevel, and then we're going to say it's permitted. But if it doesn't disintegrate and it grows together in it, even the gidulim are forbidden. So if you wanted to suggest that Rabbi Yanai was talking about things like onions and garlics that are going to grow, and it was talking about a gidul of a gidul is permitted, it's not permitted. From that Mishnah, we see that it's not permitted at all. To which the Gemara says, Ribuya de Rabu Gidulin Alikaro Mutal Kamashmalan. Okay, now we finally have a resolution. What Rabbi Yanai was talking about and why he differs from this Mishnah about the Tevel is because the Mishnah that says the Gidulim of the Gidulim are Asurim, okay, which Rabbi Yanai is trying to say they're permitted. Basically, we're left with the Mishnah, the first Mishnah we quoted is talking about things like that the seed disintegrates. That we're pushing aside. Now, within things that don't disintegrate, we have on the one hand the Mishnah, on the other, which says it's forbidden, the growth of the growth. And we have Rabbi Yanai who says it's permitted. So how are we going to distinguish between this contradiction? Okay, we're going to keep the explanation from before that Rabbi Yanai was only speaking about gidulin, and he wasn't talking about an actual onion of truma. He was talking about an onion that grew from an onion of truma. Okay? Now, we're going to say that Rabbi Yanai is talking about ribuya de rabu gidulim alikaro. If there's enough of what grew, now for truma you need 100 times. There's enough of what grew to nullify it, then the gidulim will be permitted. It will be nullified. When the Mishna said, the Tevel Mishna, where it said it's not nullified, the gidulim, it's not nullified if, in other words, just because you replanted it doesn't mean it's permitted. You still need laws of nullification to kick in. Just replanting it doesn't get rid of the original thing that was forbidden. It's only that we're now going to say, if the growth has enough to nullify it, then it'll work. The Mishnah wasn't talking about where there was enough to nullify, and therefore there were two different situations, and that's how we resolve the situation. With that, Hadran alacha Nedarim and Hayarach, starting the 8th chapter. Now, the 8th chapter is going to be dealt a lot with language of your neder. Different, right? We started with the first word, konam, konach, all those. Then we moved to the object of what you're making a vow about, right? The food or what did you mean when you said that? What does it include? And now we're moving to the time frame. So what if you say different time frames? What's going to be included in that time frame? Konam yain shani toem hayom. Okay, so konam is wine that I will taste today. You limited it by the day. Eino asur ela ad shtechshach, until it gets dark. Once it's dark, that's no longer part of the day. Shabbat zo asur b'chol Shabbat. Vish Shabbat shavrat. You say Shabbat zo, which means this week. It's forbidden the entire week from whenever you vowed until Shabbat. And what about Shabbat? Well, Shabbat shavrat. There's different versions of the text. There's different ways of understanding it. We're going to explain it in this way. It means that Shabbat is considered part of the previous week. So if I'm standing on Wednesday and I say, I vow this week I'm not going to drink wine, then I can't drink wine Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and including Shabbat. Right? This is like I look at any calendar. Shabbat is considered part of the previous week. Chodesh zeh. What if you say this month? Asur b'chol chodesh v'rosh chodesh lahaba. But the Rosh Chodesh, right, which is usually the first of the month, although we'll get to what do you mean? What if there's 2 days of Rosh Chodesh, which we'll talk about soon. But right now, assume Rosh Chodesh is part of the next month, which is obvious because right, the first of the month is obviously not considered the last day of the previous month. So we'll have to see in the Gemara why they mention this. Shana zo, asur b'chol hashana v'rosh hashana la'atid lavo. It's also pretty obvious. This year, you can't have it this year, but you can have it already. Rosh Hashanah is the next year. Shavua zeh, now we're back to something that's more similar to Shabbat, which is Shavua zeh, if I say this 7-year cycle, asur b'chol hashavua v'shvi'it she'avra. So again, the Shemitah year is considered the previous cycle. So therefore, this set of 7 years, that year, the 7th year, is going to be included in my neder, in my vow. V'imama. Now we get to different language. If I said Yom Echad or Shabbat Echad, 1 day, 1 week, Chodesh Echad, 1 month, Shana Echad, 1 year, Shavua Echad, 1 7-year cycle, Asur miyom liyom. Then it's not like I could say I'm standing on Wednesday. It just goes through Shabbat. It goes from Wednesday to Wednesday, or from 12 o'clock midday to 12 o'clock midday. Whatever time it was, 24 hours. Whatever day it was, 7 days. Whatever month it was, a whole month. Whatever year it was, a whole year. Whatever cycle in the Shemitah it was, 7 years from there. What if I say ad ha-Pesach, until Pesach? Asur ad sheyagia, I'm forbidden until Pesach arrives. Ad sheyehei ha-Pesach, until Pesach will be, then asur ad sheyetzeh. Then I seem to be including the holiday itself. Ad lifnei ha-Pesach, which usually we would translate as until before Pesach. So Rabbi Meir Omer asur ad sheyagia, it's forbidden until Pesach. Rabbi Yossi Omer asur ad sheyetzeh. Lifnei can also be translated in Hebrew, lifnot, is as it's about to change. So some people understand lifnei toward the end of, okay? So like lifnot erev, as it's about to be switched to evening. So lifnei Pesach, some people think it means the end of Pesach. And therefore, Rabbi Yossi says it's forbidden until Pesach actually ends. Konam yain shani to'en. The Gemara starts off quoting the first case and is going to quote Rabbi Yirmia. Later in the Gemara, they're going to refer to him as Rabbi Yirmia bar Abba, which were 2 different people. It's either they were what's going to happen later is relating to this. So either it was all said by Rabbi Yirmia, who was an Emorah from Israel, or it was said about Rabbi Yirmia, who was a different Emorah. Amar Rabbi Yirmia, even though when I said wine will be forbidden to me today, we mean until the sun sets or 3 stars come out. But if I want to drink that night, I actually need to go to a chacham and get him to undo the vow. My timer, why is this? Amar Rav Yosef, gzera hayom mishum yom echad. We want to forbid it because we're worried that if you say hayom finishes right that day and not later into the night, then yom echad, people might think that yom echad is also until the night and that it doesn't really mean 24 hours. So in order to prevent people from thinking that, we're going to be strict. Soon we're going to see why was there a need to be so strict with vows. Amar le, to which he says to him, someone says to him, we don't know who, although the Bach adds in the words Abaye, who often has comments to Rav Yosef. If so, then Yom Echad should also be all the way until the night. Otherwise, we'll confuse it, right? Let's say I'm standing in midday. It would be a whole day till 12 plus until the evening. Because again, you might say if we allow it in midday, you might think Hayom also would be end midday, even though that's a weird thing. And that's what the Gemara is going to say. You wouldn't really think that. Amar le, Hayom b'yom echad michla, Yom echad b'Hayom lo michla. In other words, if you say Hayom and Hayom ends at sunset, you might get confused with Yom echad and think that ends at sunset. But if you do the 24-hour option and you end after 24 hours, no one's going to confuse that and think that today is going to end in the middle of the day because today was, anyway, first of all, it's the next day already. It doesn't really make sense that one would get confused. Amar Ravina, Amar li Mereimar. So Ravina says that Mereimar told him, Hachi Amar Avuch Mishmei de Rav Yosef. He said, Mereimar told Ravina, this is what your father said in the name of Rav Yosef. Kiman az lashmate de Rav Yirmia bar Abba. Here it is, where they mention Rav Yirmia bar Abba, but maybe it's really Rabbi Yirmia, or maybe before it was Rav Yirmia bar Abba who spoke. Who is he going according to that he's so strict and requires she'elat chacham, going to a wise man to undo the vow? Ki Rabbi Natan. Titania, you might remember this, we keep quoting this all throughout the Masechet. Rabbi Natan, anybody who takes a vow is as if he built a bama. Those were forbidden to build outside the temple. And anyone who keeps his vow is as if he's sacrifices outside the temple. Meaning, because they were down about vows and they didn't want people to make vows, they were very upset with people who made vows, they made it stricter for them. So, you're going to make a vow? Well, even though your vow really only applies till nighttime, we're going to make you go to a chacham to undo it. Shabbat zil, asur b'chol Shabbat kula. So now the Gemara says, of course you're forbidden all week. Why are you telling us this? It's pretty obvious. Shabbat means week, and therefore you're forbidden all week. Pshita, it's obvious. Well, ma'u detema yomei de Shabta kama. Maybe you meant Shabbat zo, right? You hadn't been learning Gemara, and I told you many times that Shabbat means week. You might have also thought Shabbat means Shabbat, right? What it usually means. And maybe you meant I'm only vowing to not drink wine on Shabbat. Kamash malan. Therefore, it comes to tell you no. When people say Shabbat zo, they mean the week. Chodesh zeh, asur b'chol chodesh, v'rosh chodesh lahaba. If you say this month, you can't do it all month. And Rosh Chodesh is the next month. Pshita, also very obvious. Who's going to think that the first of the month is going to be considered part of the previous month? Well, it's needed for if the incoming month is a Chodesh Chaser, that means a 29-day month, which means if this month it's finishing now that I vowed about is a Chodesh Maleh, is a 30-day month, in which case, Ma'u detema Chodesh L'Sha'avar Have. Now you would think day 30, which is called Rosh Chodesh, but it's the 30th of the previous month, should be included in your vow. V'lo litzar, and it shouldn't be forbidden. V'lo litzar, sorry, the opposite. What are we saying? Ma'u detema Rosh Chodesh l'sha'avar have v'lo litzar. If you're standing in a Chodesh Chaser, maybe I misunderstood this. If you're standing in a Chodesh Chaser, what they're saying, I misunderstood this. Okay. If you're standing in a Chodesh Chaser, Yom Rishon shel Rosh Chodesh mashlim lechodesh maleh zeh she'avar zeh nechnas chaser v'hu nadar b'yom Rishon shel Rosh Chodesh. If you made a neder, now I understand. If you made a neder on the 30th of the month, when you're about to go into a chodesh chaser, a 29-day month, so you made your vow on day 30, and you said this month. So you might have thought this month starts with tomorrow, right? You meant this upcoming month, and that this day is not included. But Kamash Malam, they come to tell you, no, this is included. Okay, this is included in why? Kamash Malam Karu Inashe Reish Yarcha. People call it Rosh Chodesh, and therefore they, even though you're in the 30th day, since it's already called Rosh Chodesh, you're already part of the next month. Okay, and therefore it's already forbidden to you that day. Shana zo asur b'chol hashana kula. If you say this year, you're forbidden all year. They ask the following question now. Okay, we're not really up to the Shana yet. We'll get to that soon. More in tomorrow's daf. If I say I won't drink wine day, I don't say today. I don't say yom echad. I say day. So dina kehayom. Is it like hayom, which it ends at nighttime, or kiyom echad, 24 hours from right now? Tashmami matnitin. Let's try to derive it from our Mishna, although in the end we won't be successful. If you say today, hayom, then it's only forbidden till nighttime. Ha-yom ki-yom echad, which means anything else, which would include yom, must be like yom echad, 24 hours. To which the Gemara says that's a silly inference, because ema seifa, you could say the exact same thing from the second part. Amar yom echad asur yom echad asur miyom liyom. If you say yom echad, what does it say in the Mishnah? One day, it's 24 hours, which would seem to imply only if you say one day. But if you only said yom, then it would be, right, hayom ki hayom dami, means that yom would be like the first case. So in other words, what we have here is one of these classic cases where they try to say, oh, it only said this case, it must not mean that case. But then they said, but then the opposite was only said that case, which means it wouldn't be that case, which means you're stuck with where does yom fall? You can't derive it from either part of the Mishnah, which is what the Gemara is going to say right now. You can't actually infer it from here. To which Rav Ashi, we're only going to start this today, but Rav Ashi is going to bring a proof from a different braita. Tashma konam yain shani to'em hashana. You say yain that I drink this year. Nit abra hashana asur ba ubi ibura. If it becomes a leap year, then you're forbidden for that entire year, including the extra month. What does this have to do with it? We're going to have to wait till tomorrow to see. And with that, we'll finish for today. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom, Shavuot Tov, and Hanukkah Sameach.